Hi, and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and inasmuch as I was away last week, we are knee deep. I could begin almost anywhere, but we'll start with the weather. More on it later, but the Masters is this week, and Augusta National is always amazing. The Azaleas make it the most gorgeous tournament year in and year out. But I am farther north, typically a couple of weeks behind, but my warm March has my azaleas peaking. And the wisteria is out, and the spirea, and the dogwoods, and these things that I don't know what they're called, and these other things, and I don't know what they're called either. Speaking of the azaleas, this one gets extra credit because, remember in December, all over east of the Mississippi, we had that weird warmth. This one bloomed, not like now, not as robustly, but a few blooms in December. And now here it is, fully adorned again just a couple of months later. Extra credit. Anyway, the forecast for Sunday is terribly cold, mid-20s cold. And while that could hit the blooms hard, and that would be a little bit sad, think how bad it will be for all the fruit trees that started too early. This cold that's coming in is part of a cold system that's packing a big punch. I'm told that in Cleveland, my hometown, it's the worst snowstorm of the entire season. Here we are in the first week of April. Oh, and this week I had a buzzard again. I don't know, maybe it returned from the festival in Hinckley, Ohio, because it knew the cold was coming, or maybe it's a very affluent buzzard, and it has enough resources to wait for high season. All right, had we had a show last week, I would have noted the passing of Patty Duke. She died Tuesday, March 29th, of sepsis, caused by a ruptured intestine, which is basically what appendicitis is, except this was apparently not her appendix. She was a gifted actress. She won the Oscar for her role as Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. I think she was 16. And she also had a TV show. But she had a very tough life. She had toxic parents, and they turned her over to her talent managers. But they were greedy and abusive, and they kept a lot of her money, so she drank, she used drugs. You know, we've made some progress over the years, too, in diagnoses, and she was finally diagnosed with bipolar disease. Anyway, her intestines were probably weakened by her years of substance abuse, and it's a sad story. We were the beneficiaries of her talents. I hope in her last years she was the beneficiary of good medicine for her bipolar, and that she enjoyed the love of her kids. She was 69.
I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee, place where even squares can have a ball.
Then just this past week, we lost the Okie from Muskogee, Merle Haggard. Lots of hit songs. He was one of the original outlaws of country music, the others being the late Waylon Jennings and the iconic Willie Nelson. And Merle Haggard also had a tough childhood. His father died. He was young. He ended up being arrested and jailed a number of times, but he did get his life turned around. He died when he was exactly 79 years old. I say exactly because he died on his birthday, April 6th, of pneumonia. You know, you'd think pneumonia, we'd have a better handle on it, but it's still deadly. Jim Backus, who was Thurston Howell on Gilligan's Island, he died of pneumonia in 1989. George Allen, the football coach for both LA and Washington, he died in 1990. Christian Brando, Marlon's son, died of pneumonia in 2008. Bob Hoskins just over 2 years ago. And Wayne Rogers, Trapper John, just a couple of months ago, all from pneumonia. So if you get something like that, get thee thyself to thy healer. Okay, we have to take some note of the presidential primaries. The Republicans, excepting John Kasich, are still hating on each other, but that is not news. What is news is that Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders are taking harder shots at each other. Why? Because, and against all odds, more people are feeling the burn. 6 out of the last 7 have been won by Bernie Sanders. And I've said this before, he's just refreshing in his obvious authenticity. No focus groups, no hairstylists. You know, there may be a metaphor in there somewhere. But in the movie The Graduate, at his graduation party, Benjamin Braddock is told by I don't know, an uncle, a family friend, an older male, what to get into. The future was plastics. And of course, back then, Coca-Cola came in bottles and cans, yes, but in bottles. Everything came in glass. Televisions came in wooden cabinets. Today, plastics. Around then, I had well, she's still a friend, but it was around then she wrote a song called Plastic World. It was a lamenting of how phony and synthesized everything was becoming, and that was decades ago. We are more synthetic and more plastic, and we've got gadgets. We instinctively know a lot of this stuff that we're being peddled is crap. Whether it's an app that we don't need, or food that's not real food, or a pill for medical conditions that aren't even really medical conditions. So then this guy with the uncombed hair and the plain suits, he speaks with an authenticity that is unmatched. Not Donald Trump, not Ted Cruz, not Hillary Clinton. I'm not saying that everything he says is correct or that I agree with, but I'm saying that he argues those points with an authenticity that's probably not existed in American politics and since, give him hell, Harry. Harry Truman. He's gone from being the guy that almost no one outside of Vermont ever heard of to winning 6 of the last 7 primaries. My deadline is before Saturday's caucus results in Wyoming, but who knows? And he hasn't just been winning. If someone wins an election by, say, getting 54% of the votes, it's considered a landslide. So in this week, just in Wisconsin, Field of Bern got 56.5%. 2 weeks ago, Mrs. Clinton got her only win out of the last 7. That was in Arizona. She got 57%. But that same day, Field of Bernie won Utah, 78%, and Idaho, where he got 79%. And it was said that it doesn't matter. Those are small states. He doesn't have many delegates. It's true, he's behind. But he also won Michigan, and now he's won Wisconsin. The only word you can use for this is astonishing. Mrs. Clinton still has more delegates, but he's got the momentum. And big states like New York, Pennsylvania, California, they are still ahead. And get this, he has raised more money than any other candidate, either party, in January, February, and March. You got to wonder what she and her campaign must be thinking. Remember, in 2008, Senator Clinton was the presumed nominee, and somehow, what's this? What the hell? Who is Barack Obama? And come on, he's black, and yet we know what happened. So now the 74-year-old guy in wrinkled suits and fuzzy hair seems to have gained the momentum. It is fascinating. And we know she's tough. And still, looking back at 2008, Yogi Berra would have said, it's deja vu all over again. Oh, and whatever else may have happened since our last get-together, the air may have finally begun to leak out of Donald Trump's balloon. He is still the one in front. He is still the only one who can mathematically get to the needed majority, 1237. But after his bad week, it may be that voters have noticed calling people names, like in grammar school, isn't exactly what people want for a leader on the world stage, really. The result is they probably will have a wide open convention this summer in Cleveland, which leads to a bunch of possibilities. If Donald Trump doesn't get the requisite 1237, will any of his pledged delegates hold on after the first vote? And if not, will they go to Ted Cruz? Cruz is still in second, but he is almost as hated within the Republican Party by his own colleagues as Donald Trump. Will they go for John Kasich? You know, his claim is he acts like a grown-up, and I guess that's so. He's only won one state, which, Ohio, that's where he lives. But what if Trump has the most delegates but not a majority, and then he doesn't get the nomination? Will the trumpeters riot? I call them trumpeters as opposed to trumpets, because he is overwhelmingly disliked by women. Oh, this insanity. It was proposed that as a real petition was being circulated nationally, that convention delegates in Cleveland should be, if licensed to do so in their home states, be allowed to carry concealed firearms to the convention. Can you think of anything more crazy? So if Trump doesn't get it, there'll be a lot of angry people, very angry, with guns. Obviously, the Secret Service put the kibosh on that. Oh, and if the Trumpster does not get the nomination, will he run as an independent? This is easily the wildest election season in my lifetime. Historically, it may be rivaled only by 1912 and 1860, both of which had parties with existential problems. All right, so the next big primary is New York, not this week, but next, April 19th. And then Pennsylvania is a week later. This week, though, Tuesday, April 12th, no primary, no caucus, but that doesn't mean there's nothing going on. Tuesday, the 12th, will also, it's National Be Kind to Lawyers Day. Really. But it's also probably worth mentioning that it was on April 12th in 1861, 155 years ago, that the born in Louisiana General Pierre Gustave Toussaint Beauregard opened fire on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. Yep, the opening of the Civil War 155 years ago. I am reminded of a humorous newspaper column I read while living in Atlanta. And the writer wrote of some northern friends who they were visiting and they went to see some sights and historical things. And one of the northern friends commented on something, and she, being a proper southern born and bred woman, said something like, "Oh, that's been that way ever since the war." The war? What war? Why, the war with y'all. I still remember it was funny. Of course, it really wasn't a civil war. A civil war is what is in Libya or maybe Somalia or even Syria. What we call the Civil War was a war between the states. Or in the South, it's often called the War for Southern Independence. And in fact, that's what it was. There wasn't anarchy. It was exactly the same thing as our Revolutionary War. We fought to be free of the British control, and they were mightier and stronger. You know, it's hard to fight a war across an ocean, even today, and they only had sailing ships. So, 22 northern states against 11 Confederates. It's no surprise that the North won. The only surprise is that it took so long. But had the South won, they would have fought of it as their second Revolutionary War. One more note about this Tuesday, April 12th, and it's particularly ironic given that the war started on April 12th. It's also National Equal Pay Day. We may not have equal pay exactly, but, you know, before the war, there were a lot of folks who did a lot of hard work and got zero pay. All right, at the week's beginning, college basketball wrapped up both the men's and the women's Division I-A championships. Both were remarkable in different ways. The women from the University of Connecticut won their fourth straight title. That is a new record, 4 consecutive. They had been at 3, tied with Tennessee's women, but what was really remarkable is how they smashed their way through the tournament. Crazy, lopsided scores. Just amazing. On the men's side, I'd said a couple of weeks ago that the ACC, the Atlantic Coast Conference, is a basketball conference, and it's true. North Carolina has 4 teams from Wake Forest. That's in Winston-Salem. The University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Duke is in Durham. NC State and Raleigh, and they're all basketball powers. But all over the ACC, there are basketball powers. Proof is that the ACC had 2 teams in the Final Four, Syracuse and UNC. UNC has won a couple of championships, and they're always a contender. This year they faced Villanova in the final. They fell well behind, and then made a furious push to tie. They tied it with just under 5 seconds. So, wow, if you're a UNC fan, you got to feel pretty good. They got the momentum back, you know? And then a 3-point buzzer beater, and they lost. As a kid from Cleveland, I am well acquainted with the last-second heartbreak in sports. So, as a non-native, I didn't have my heart ripped out, but a good number of my friends did. Oh, I discovered there was a different kind of March Madness this week. A site called Cast Aside pitted 64 musicals representing 4 different eras, and the people got to vote. And then as each winner continued through the various brackets, ultimately it came to be the Final Four and then the championship. A couple of points. I think this is a cool idea. I had never seen it before, but I'm going to watch for it next year. I think they do it annually. And if you'd like to see how it all went down match by match by match through the brackets, Google Musical Theater Madness 2016. You'll get a couple of hits, but choose the one that is from Cast Aside. Okay. So basketball was ending and baseball began. It's like this every year, you know. It's cold in some places. Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit, Milwaukee. Cleveland's home opener got snowed out a couple of years ago. This time it wasn't snowed out, but it was forecast to be wet. and in the 30s, so they postponed it a day. It's a shame because there were a lot of fans that were downtown. The restaurants were doing a good business. The atmosphere was festive despite the weather. And then they called the game. Were I there, I had been pretty disappointed. Kids had taken off from school. Lots of adults had taken off from work, but it's awfully hard to do that. A second consecutive game. They don't have many day games anymore, but opening day is traditionally in the day. Oh, speaking of baseball, this is great. This has been around in one form or another since at least the early 1900s, but it got refined by two guys you probably have heard of, and the very first national performance on the radio by Abbott and Costello was in March of 1938. First performance of what? Wait, what's on second? So I've given it away, right? Of course, I speak of Abbott and Costello's Who's on First? So, nearly 80 years later, this is seen this week. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. Or wait, I can let others do it. So welcome back. Remember, you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com and see all of our previous shows at tinyurl.com/Bruce Channel or at our Facebook page. So, at my deadline, I obviously don't know who will win the Masters. It winds up this afternoon, and as I record this, I don't even know who's in the lead Sunday morning. But there are nevertheless some really amazing things to take note of. First, all right, it's my favorite tournament. And that's true for a lot of people who grew up in the north because, as cited earlier, it can still be cold and snowy. But every year the azaleas bloom and it just brings testimony to the fact that better times are coming, even in places where it's not easy being green in April. Which is one reason it was very special for me to have been at the Masters 30 years ago. I was at the 1986 Masters, and it was a feeling of being in church. Anyway, what are some of the remarkable circumstances this year? Well, as is the norm for virtually every tournament, it is being played over 4 rounds Thursday through Sunday. It began in 1934. In all of that time, the record for any one player to lead is 6 consecutive rounds. Arnold Palmer won the tournament in 1960, and he led after each round. And then in 1961, he led after the first 2. He didn't win that tournament, but 6 rounds. Another stat, only 3 men have ever won it twice in a row. Jack Nicklaus in 65-66, Nick Faldo in 89 and 90, and Tiger Woods in 2001 and 02. So 2 years ago, 20-year-old Jordan Spieth, at 20, arguably still a kid, he plays for the first time in the Masters. He comes in second. Last year, his second time there, he wins it. And he won it wire to wire. That is, he led after each of the 4 rounds. Of course, last year was magical for him. Then he won the U.S. Open. He came close in both the British Open and the PGA. So at my deadline, they have played 2 rounds. And guess what? He has been in front both ways. He is now tied with Arnold Palmer. And Friday was very tough. Super, super windy. Super windy. I mean, it was even affecting the balls on the greens that were being putted. So if he's on top after Saturday's round, that'll be a new record. And if he wins it, he'll only be the 4th guy to pull off a double. It is also going to be unbelievably exciting because of his playing partner. By virtue of coming in second Friday, Jordan will be playing Rory McIlroy. He is an unbelievably good player too. He and Justin Day and Jordan Spieth have been taking turns being ranked number one over the last couple of years. So this matchup is like a dream. It's like few you ever see. If you golf at all, this is must-see TV. And even if you don't, but if you live where it's cold and maybe snow, it still might be must-see TV. Oh, and how's this for coincidence? Sunday the 10th, today is also National Golfers' Day. I can't make this stuff up. All right, so because there was no show, because I was in South Carolina last week, there was no show. I was in South Carolina, easy for me to say, South Carolina, working on a picture called Masters of Disasters. Naturally, I could, but I won't. I don't want to spoil it for you. But essentially, the premise is there are two teenage boys. They like to blow things up with firecrackers, things like boxes and old computer monitors and whatever. Keep in mind, this is South Carolina. Fireworks are legal. Anyway, my character is a bit of a mystery. It's supernatural. And I challenged them to expand their horizons, their ideas of what they might blow up. It looks like I'll have to return to Charleston in June. All right, finally this. I didn't know this, but apparently there is real value. Apparently there is awareness and a being out there that has a value within the film industry. So, a favor, if you would, go to my page at the International Movie Database, imdb.com. Enter Bruce Michaels, and you'll see a couple of this will come up. I think there's a sound guide and whatnot, but you should see me listed with this picture. And then if you click on my page and scroll down on the right, there's a place to like the page. And apparently this actually matters. So again, I'd consider it a favor if you would. I would further consider it a favor if you also thought to share the page, whether via Facebook or Twitter, and there's opportunities for that too. And I'd consider it still a further favor if you'd tell your friends, the ones whom you talk to, that is, talk to personally rather than electronically. So if you ask them to do likewise, it adds up. I didn't know that until just this week. So that is it for this week. Think of Fort Sumter. Think of National Be Kind to Lawyers Week. However you spend it, I hope the upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.